And it seems like this particular thing is the top 49ers storyline right now. Vish, why don't you reveal it to our viewers?
Yeah, to me, this is a no-brainer, and I'm surprised there hasn't been much buzz about this. It's the Fred Warner contract. This needs to
not
start
the
getting
injuries. It's not the quarterbacks. It's not the coach. It's Fred Warner.
Yeah, this to me, this is something that the process needs to start expediting, where this should be the conversation. And I think that it's our duty. I mean, you obviously have the large platform. I'm somebody who just shares your platform for one Monday a week. But as an opportunity I have to come on here, which, first of all, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. I think it's our duty to start talking about this a lot more. This needs to be in the news. This contract needs to get done. This guy needs to get paid. He needs to get paid soon. And I understand that they will end up doing it. But to me, this is something that needs to be done in the next 2 months. This is something that needs to be done before training camp. I've talked about the outside reasons, right, of getting the Fred Warner deal done, like the benefit of signing him before Darius Leonard gets paid and Roquan Smith gets paid and Tremaine Edmonds gets paid, because then you can reset the market before the market gets reset. So that's one thing for sure, right? Those are the outside benefits, the monetary benefits. But number two, this is a guy who just showed up to minicamp ready to go, in shape. You said he looked great, as he always does.
Yeah.
He's ready to go, geared up for another football season. He doesn't look like he's going to hold out or anything. Yeah. Well, at least let him be financially stable before he goes into training camp so that he can continue to work out and compete the way he has been. To me, at this point, like, I don't know why we haven't gotten any buzz where the Niners and Fred Warner have started engaging talks. That's where I'm a little bit weary, because we haven't gotten that buzz yet. You know, I think at this point we've been hearing that George Kittle and the Niners.
That's what I was going to say. I just wrote it down.
It was
we
going
did this
well
last year. Yeah. And by now, Kittle, there have been reports about Kittle. It was like a whole drama all offseason, right?
Right. And of course, we didn't have Trey Lance last offseason, and we didn't have – well, we had the injuries. We didn't have the injuries after last year's injuries. So we didn't have those things. But to me, if you remember after the draft, John Lynch said, we haven't started yet, but that's on our next thing on the to-do list. Well, what are you waiting for? I'm still waiting for Ian Rappaport to say, you know, the Niners and linebacker Fred Warner have started talks and started moving towards getting the extension, because it's not about whether it will be taken care of or whether it won't. It's just something that needs to be taken care of before training camp, in my opinion.
Also, the thing with Kittle last year, if I remember correctly, there was a lot of phrasing coming from Matt Mayoko and what I interpreted to be Kittle's camp, saying he was not going to step back on the field without an extension, that there's just too much at stake. You could get hurt in practice. He's a guy who had gotten hurt before, wasn't going to step back on the field before he got an extension. I don't know if that was the truth, but it never came to that. And by the 11th hour, he got the extension. Now, what helped him was there was no spring practices. He didn't have to make that choice. Do I go to OTAs, which are voluntary? I think it's interesting that Fred Warner went. You know, like, Trent Williams wasn't practicing, but freaking Fred Warner was there. I think it's clear he's not really worried about injuries. He's never gotten hurt, and it helps him to drag this out. You've explained it. If he signs after Darius Leonard, that's only good for him. So maybe there's less desire and urgency on his part than there was on Kittle's part.
I understand that, but in terms of Kittle, right, he was kind of the 1-in-1. Like, Darren Waller wasn't going to get paid. Kelsey did get extended, and he basically got the same extension Kittle did. But Kelsey and Waller kind of separate themselves by a large amount from the rest of the position. Now, you and I believe Fred Warner is the best in the NFL at his position. There's a population of people that believe it's Eric Kendricks. There's some people that believe it's Darius Leonard. There's some people that still believe it's Bobby Wagner. There's some people that believe it's Levante David.
White.
There's a lot of guys that are there within this conversation.
True.
And that's where, like, if Fred Warner, I see people commenting, and you mentioned how it might be good for him to wait. That's where it's shocking to me that he did come and all of that. Yeah. If he was willing to wait, then wouldn't the best move for him be? Because he does a great job of keeping himself in shape.
Yeah.
He doesn't need these practices. So that's where I look at it, and I go an extra step further, and I say, look at Fred Warner, the consummate professional and the leader of this football team. Last year, he made a promise. He said, and I don't usually put stock into these type things, but Fred Warner is so authentic that when he says it, I listened, and he said that the Niners are never going to have another season like this as long as he's there, where they're going to not make the playoffs and do this. And it looks like he's come back this season with a vengeance to ensure that, you know, the Niners don't have another season where they're 6-10. He wants to be a playoff team. He wants to play in the playoffs and all of those things. And he's ready to uplift the guys around him. That's where, to me, this is just something like I think it's time. Like, the talks need to start getting engaged. And it shouldn't have to be a storyline. I don't care if it gets drawn out or anything. To me, it's just something that I hope the Niners begin, because extending this guy, to me, is the most important thing this offseason.
Let me do my best to predict how this is going to go. I don't think he's going to hold out. From what I understand, they've changed the rules with the collective bargaining, and it's $50,000 a day, a fine, and you don't get the money back. It used to be, we'll fine you, but when you come back, we'll give the money back. As a show of good faith. You can't do that anymore. So however many days you want to leave, and I mean, what's he made in his career? $2 million. He was a third-round pick, something like $3 million. I don't think he's going to want to do that. And I think he's already made it clear. If he's going to show up for OTAs, which are, optional, then he's going to be at training camp too. So my best guess here is that he's going to show up, and that I'm guessing the 49ers have put something in front of him, to get the negotiation started, and that Fred Warner, his response could be silence. His response could be, come on now. You're going to need to meet me on my terms, because I'm the number one middle linebacker and you've said so. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm going to wait until you give me what I want. And if you don't, I'll play it out and we'll see what happens next year. That could be bad.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm just not going to sign this.
Yeah. And
I'll play it out.
To me, that's where, if you're the 49ers, that's where the sense of urgency comes in. Because the other thing is, we've talked about, as much as Trey Lance helps the entire cap situation, we've talked about the number of where this roster could be in 2022, given the number of really good veteran players that are on one-year deals. And we've also talked about what happens to Eric Armstead's contract, what happens to George Kittle's contract, what happens to Trent Williams' contract, 2022 and 2023. These are conversations we've had in the past. That's where, to me, it becomes the most prudent thing of, what if Darius Leonard resets the market by $4 or $5 million? Like, Bobby's at 18 with a $20 million cap hit I want to see. What if Darius Leonard gets paid 22 with a $21 million cap hit, Then it becomes a little more difficult, because the Niners have shown that they want to minimize damage to their cap in how they sign contracts. That's Parag Marate's philosophy. Everyone says that his contracts are team friendly. In a sense, they are obviously team friendly, but the entire idea of them is that he protects the team. He basically protects the team from risk, right? So like the Eric Armstead contract, like, the numbers look large, but the Niners have so many details where they can unload him at different points. They can get rid of him for minimal damage at some point. So at the end of the day, like, tomorrow, if Eric Armstead doesn't live up to his contract, you can't say it hurt the 49ers, because they're financially protected. But in a sense, you can look back and say, well, these are the guys they missed out on signing, and so it hurt the 49ers. But overall, honestly, to me, this is a situation where I think both sides want to get it done. And, I think you can reset the market. You don't need to wait on Darius Leonard, because Fred Warner doesn't need to know that. He can become the highest paid linebacker by $2 or $3 million. To me, it's a no-brainer, because he's played at that level, right? You don't need Darius Leonard to set the market, because Warner is better than Darius Leonard, in our opinion.
I just think it's an interesting situation, because the 49ers and Parag in particular are at their most comfortable in negotiations when they have something, some type of leverage over the player. Say the player's in his 30s, or he's coming off an injury, or he plays a position like tight end, which kind of gets discriminated against, unlike wide receivers. You always got something on him. Fred Warner, I mean, he's 24, 25. He's never missed a game. He's an all-pro. They've called him the best at his position. Middle linebackers aren't a premium position, but they get darn near $20 million a year now. All of a sudden, you're kind of in that Buckner situation, who was a defensive tackle, not a defensive end, but still a very good position, where you're like, man, I kind of have to give him whatever he wants. We've said he's the best. And like, those aren't necessarily the negotiations that the Niners like. I mean, it's almost like, that's why I almost feel like this could fall apart, even though they've said they wanted to keep him here. What if Fred Warner doesn't budge and says, I'm willing to play out this final year and only accept what my terms, and if you don't give it to me, I'll move on.
They're screwed.
I'll play out this year. Screwed. So there's some urgency on the Niners to not mess around. And if you said he's the best, then pay him like he's the best. End of story.
Right. And it's not, to me, this isn't like, oh, the talk should have started. Like, I wish they would have started, but there's still time before training camp. But
the silence is interesting.
Now is the time where, you have the pressure needs to start going. The Niners need to ramping up.
The
and
ball
really
needs
getting
to start rolling.
That needs to be the first priority. Enough of talking about whether we need to sign Richard Sherman back or not. Right. The signing that needs to happen is this guy needs to get extended.
And as you know, this is a process that will be reported on the whole step of the way. The negotiations have started. They're making progress. It's not like one day they'll be like, oh, extension. No, there'll be all kind of reports in between. And the fact that there hasn't been any yet, a vet like Vish is like, yo, what's up with that? And even if you're not a vet, remember last year what it was like with Kittle. You should know that it's been a little different this year. All right, we got to take
that's what makes me a little worried, right? Like, it's not to say that this deal won't get done. I don't want to sound negative, but from my perspective, just as a fan sitting in my bedroom in Chicago, watching DeForest Buckner get traded, even though he's different because he didn't get drafted by this regime, watching the George Kittle contract situation, which clearly there was a little bit of tension, watching the Trent Williams contract situation where he said my boy Kyle, and my boy Kyle had to save me and get it done. And
Parag basically put his foot down and was like, you know what, go to Kansas City. And Kyle was like, no. Let's give him what he wants. Yeah.
Right. And that's where this might, I am a little worried that this might get a little contentious before it finally gets done.
Austin says, what concerns me about Warner is that statistically, the longer he goes without an injury, the more likely he is to get injured. Is this season? Yeah, I mean, as you get older, you get more likely to get injured in football. Yeah, I mean, they're going to happen eventually. Yeah, that's a good point. But still, dude, guy's never missed a game. He's the leader of the defense.
So what makes Warner a little special to me in two ways is, one, for a linebacker, he doesn't get into a lot of high-speed collisions. True. Like Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis used to get into car crashes every game. This guy is a little more finesse than both of those two guys. And number two, if you watch Fred Warner tackle and stuff, if you watch any coaches break down what they want in tackling, Matt Patricia's got a really good letdown where he breaks down what he looks for in tackling and how they teach how to tackle. Fred Warner tackling technique is almost as perfect as it gets, so he doesn't put his body in harm's way with how he tackles. Jimmy Ward's another guy that tackles really, really perfectly. Reuben Foster was the opposite. He used to really drive his shoulder in there, and he used to get stingers every game.